Welcome to our Elite Agent Collab. We're ready to roll. How you doing, John?
It's hot outside.
It is hot outside. We're in the DMV, but I think it's probably hot in most places. But you know what is not particularly hot right now?
It seems like the real estate market is cooling off a little bit.
It does. It just seems like maybe that's one spot that could benefit from some summer heating up. And so one of the things we looked at was like, what does that actually mean? Because we really looked at being on pace this year for a little bit of a bump from 2023 to 2024. And I think that created a lot of optimism for a lot of us to see a little bit more activity in overall national home sales. And after the first half of the year, it looks like maybe it won't be. Like maybe it'll be flat, which means there's some interesting things happening in both local and national markets that we want to highlight. And then we want to really leave you with actionable tactics. What do you do with all this market data so that you can actually drive your business forward when there's maybe less in your local market?
You know, it's interesting because you and I have been around for a few minutes.
You longer than me.
Yes, me longer than you. But, you know, a lot of our agent population has not been exposed to what we could be coming into.
Yeah, I was actually startled to look at the first half data. We're in one of the largest MLSs with Bright. It's the second largest MLS in the country. And so looking at that data from the first half of the year and seeing the significant increase in listings that were actually on the market, right? So we just looking at, the last month over month, we were up just in Washington, D.C., 20%. And what does that mean, right? There were 20% more listings on the market than there were in the same period in the same month the prior year. And so that is, even if there's only a month and a half of inventory, that still feels like a lot of listings.
Yeah, it is. And nationally, I think I read a report this morning that said that nationally, and once again, real estate's always hyper-local, but nationally, almost 50% increase in houses available. So the markets are changing.
Yeah, that's good perspective. So if you're in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia markets, it could be worse. So that's
I guess that's a good news.
Good perspective, mindset, lead with mindset. Yeah, so not only are there more listings, but prices are stable in a lot of the market. So it's not like we saw, some people are like, I've been through this market before. You haven't. Stop telling yourself that, right? Like listings are up. Prices in a lot of our locations are also up, even if it's just up 2 or 3%. So that means like it's not this frenzy of all of a sudden that buyers are sort of falling out of the sky.
No, actually the data tells us that listings are up, but demand has actually come down. Buyer demand has actually come down, which would typically mean, basic economic theory, we would see a depreciating values, and we haven't seen that.
We're not seeing that yet, which is why I think our first tactic is really get real, get right about what's happening in your local market and understand the really super hyper local. Never has there been a more important time to be the local economist of choice, to really understand that data, because what you're saying is what we should expect to see. And you might not be seeing that in the prior 3-month data, but you actually might see it in the active listing data. So having those conversations and being armed on the front end with data about what's happening in the market for a seller. So the seller understands not just like what happened 3 or 6 months ago, because really that's irrelevant. What's happening right now? What's the listing inventory? What's the active listing? What concessions are being offered as we move into the world of sort of new language around concessions and the removal of compensation from MLS? So really understanding all that market data going in so that you're really equipping your sellers and your buyers to be prepared for the market of the moment, not necessarily the market that we were in.
Gone could be the days of where I list a house on Friday and I count my offers on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like we may actually have to be prepared and prepare our sellers for what is the market actually doing, which could be a different conversation with sellers 100%. Right now.
And data is really what drives that. So if you aren't tracking what KW, Ruben Gonzalez, and Jen are doing around some of the market data, they're providing great monthly, and we'll connect the link on the YouTube channel to national, what's happening nationally. So that's a great resource. And then coming into local, understanding, we'll connect in some Bright data that's compiled for us around local market data. Because I think going in with that, using that in your seller reports, using that to have conversations for pricing and price reductions, is going to be a really critical piece to being competitive. Because when you look at what I also saw, and you saw that too, cancellations up 30%, canceled contracts.
Yeah.
So what happens when a contract cancels? It exposes you to potentially losing the client as a buyer or seller if the contract cancels. So making sure that you're really prepared for the conversations you need to have, providing market data and leaning in to the conversation about what's driving your clients for their results.
It goes back to setting proper expectations for the seller. I mean, and if we don't do that, I mean, the most painful thing for an agent is I take a new listing, I'm excited, And then I don't have any, the seller's expectations are, I'm counting my offers in 7 days. I have no offers. The first thing the seller starts to say is, it must be my agent.
Must be John.
Must be my
Dr.
agent.
Kimber, Dr.
Because
Kimber.
we didn't set proper expectations.
That's right.
And I think you and I both remember days where houses would be on the market for 60 days. Like, we haven't experienced that in a long time.
That's right. And so getting right. So I think number one, and we're leaning back into shift tactics. When you think about tactics to drive your business, and we're going to pull out a few that we think are most critical right now. Although I would certainly pull out the book and go back and revisit all of them if you're looking for a good resource. So getting real and getting right. And then what you're talking about, John, finding the motivated. So making sure going in, you really understand what's happening. Because even though this is maybe overwhelming or we see more listings on the market or things are sitting, like never will your market go to zero. There's always motivation. We talk about the 5 Ds, right? Death, divorce, deployment, diapers, diamonds, right? The things that are going to naturally require people to have housing and life transitions. And so those things are happening. So you want to understand what are the options, what are those conversations so that you're really prepared and you're really using your time and energy and effort against motivated buyers and sellers and investors.
Yeah, and change the conversations. I think there's preparation. There's going to be more preparation involved when I'm having them. Not only do we have the whole compensation conversation now, but now we have that combined with what is the market actually doing. So our conversations, we have to be more prepared when we're working with a buyer or a seller.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, we've hit 2 really important ones, right? Which is get real, get right, find the motivated, and then get real and get right about your business. So remargining your business, really understanding. A lot of us operate from high optimism. The market is great. The summer is good. It's going to get better on the other side. And that this is not the time to lead with optimism in your financials. So really looking at your income, looking at your revenue, and cutting those expenses. What are the expenses that are not necessary? And I always look at what's the ROI? What's the return on that investment? If you spend $1, did it generate $5 back? And if you spend $1 and you can't see a return, that needs to be a red light expense. Really cut that expense from your world because you want to be able to really survive and ultimately thrive in this market. And we're seeing that. We're seeing agents who are doubling down, whose businesses are growing, but they're also some of the best examples of people who are getting right and real about their business expenses.
I mean, I love that, but what's really alarming when people hear that sometimes, they hear, okay, cool, and they consider things expenses, and those are actually investments. So what do you double down on? Things like training and education. Because that's going to become much more necessary. Having conversation frameworks, like double down on training, education, coaching, things like that of people that have been through a market before. Accountability. What I'm really looking at is I'm looking at where did my business come from? So doing a deep dive of my business for the last 12 months and then doubling down on what worked and getting rid of the things that actually didn't work. Like you don't want to test things right now.
That's right. To that, you're really using real data to make that investment. So what are the coaching, education, accountability programs that are going to help you? But then also when you're going back and sourcing, where did the transaction closings come from? Where did the appointments come from? Where did the listings come from? And then you're doubling down there. So if you have an expense that you cannot tie back to any productivity measure in your business, you're going to have to let it go.
Which would come back to the business plan that we talked about last time.
That's right. Go back and check out the business plan. I love it. Okay. Well, I think our last one is really the pricing strategy. So we've got, pricing ahead of the market, which means this student of the market, all the stuff we were talking about in the beginning is really critical because you want to not be pricing behind and then chasing a market down, but really looking at where the trends, if there's 10, listings on the market and in the prior period you've had 3, you want to get competitive in the offering and the preparation and making sure that you're really preparing that. Because the worst thing is just literally you could have 100,000 in GCI sitting in your listing inventory.
Yes.
You will spend the money, and if you can't get it out the door, if you can't get it to closing, it's not revenue you're ever going to realize. So you want to really focus on your pricing strategy, and the value you bring as a local expert to your clients is really a critical component of helping them achieve their goals.
Yeah, and a simple way to think about pricing ahead of the market is be the best house at the best price.
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
That simple.
Like be the best house in the block at the best price.
That's right. And it takes agents who are elite agents who are informed and understand the market and their business to be able to drive that forward. So we encourage you to really get into implementation. Number 1 tactic, get real, get right. Understand your numbers. Make sure that you are fully prepared. You understand what's going on. You're a student. You are blocking time to understand nationally and most importantly, locally, what's happening in your market. Ensure that you're finding the motivated and checking in against the motivation of what your clients have so that you're putting your time and energy and resource against those who are most motivated to move through the market. And then really remargin, connect your expenses, remargin your expenses, get real, do more with less. and then ensure you're pricing ahead of the market. And that's going to help you
Survive and then thrive.
thrive. That's right. Thrive to 25.
And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thanks.